You're scrolling through your phone and you stop on a photo. Two of you, maybe three, maybe a whole group, laughing at something. A dinner, a trip, a random Tuesday night that somehow became a memory worth keeping. And you realize you haven't spoken to most of those people in over a year, maybe two, maybe longer than you're comfortable admitting. There was no fight, no falling out, no moment you could point to and say, that's where it ended. It just got quiet, slowly, the way a fire doesn't always go out with water. Sometimes it just runs out of things to burn. You put the phone down, and for a second, you sit with the strange particular grief of missing someone who is still alive, someone you could call right now, but somehow don't. And you wonder when exactly the last time was, and whether they noticed too. Nobody really talks about this kind of loss, because it doesn't have a clean shape. It doesn't come with a moment of impact or a reason to grieve out loud. There's no funeral for a friendship that faded. No one brings you flowers because a person you once told everything to has slowly become someone you only like posts from. And yet it is a loss, a real one, with real weight. The friendships that end with a slow silence are in some ways the hardest to process, precisely because they never officially end. The door never closes, it just drifts further and further until one day you realize you can no longer see what's on the other side of it. You're not cold. You're not a bad friend. You didn't do anything wrong, and neither did they, most of the time. Life moved. You moved with it. And somewhere in that movement, the distance between you became the default, and neither of you quite found the moment to close it. That is not failure, but it is something worth understanding, because understanding it might be the only thing that changes it. We tend to think of friendship endings the way we think of storms, loud, obvious, leaving visible damage. And sometimes they are. Sometimes there is an argument, a betrayal, a line crossed that changes everything. But research tells us that's actually the minority. Most friendships don't end, they just stop being tended to. And untended things, over time, quietly return to the wild. The assumption we carry is that if a friendship was real, it would survive on its own, that the strength of the bond is what maintains it. But that's not how relationships work. That's not how anything living works. A garden doesn't stay a garden because the seeds were good. It stays a garden because someone keeps showing up to tend it. And the uncomfortable truth is this: most of us are not losing friends because something went wrong. We're losing them because life got full and presents got expensive, and we kept assuming there would be time. Later, soon, when things calm down, and time, as it turns out, does not wait for us to be ready. Think about a best friend that you had, the kind of friend you didn't have to explain yourself to, who knew the backstory of every person you mentioned, who you called without a reason, just because something happened and they were the first person you wanted to tell. And then life shifted. One of you moved, or got a new job, or a relationship that took up more space, or a child who took up all of it. Nothing dramatic. Just the natural geography of a life rearranging itself. At first, you kept up. The texts were a little slower, but they were there. The calls were less frequent, but they still happened. You told yourselves you were just busy, that it was a season, not a change. But seasons became years, and somewhere in those years the intimacy quietly calcified. You still knew each other, but you knew the version of each other that existed 3 years ago, 5 years ago. The updates had stopped coming, and neither of you had formally noticed. Until one of you gets some news, good or bad, it doesn't matter. And your first instinct is to call them, and then you hesitate, because you're not sure anymore whether you're still that person to each other. And the hesitation itself tells you something has been lost. That person didn't stop caring, neither did the friend. They just both stopped showing up. Not out of cruelty, out of life. And that is a far more common story than either of them would have guessed. So, what is actually happening here? Because there is a psychology to this, a set of well-researched concepts that explain not just why it happens, but why it hurts in the particular way that it does. The first is called social entropy. It's a concept borrowed from thermodynamics, and it describes the natural tendency of all relationships to move toward disorder and distance unless energy is actively put into them. In other words, closeness is not the default state of a relationship. It is something that has to be chosen and rechosen consistently over time. When we stop maintaining our relationships, they slowly fade away, slowly, quietly, and without announcement. The second is what researchers call friendship dissolution. Every few years, we replace up to half of our close social network, not because of falling outs or betrayals, but simply because proximity changes, priorities shift, and the infrastructure that once held a friendship together, a shared workplace, a shared neighborhood, a shared season of life quietly disappears. The friendship wasn't weak, the scaffolding around it just came down. The third is relational maintenance. Communication researchers have long established that close friendships require consistent, intentional upkeep to survive life transitions. This isn't a romantic idea, it's a practical one. The friendships that last decades are almost universally the ones where at least one person kept showing up, kept reaching out, kept choosing the other person even when it wasn't convenient. Maintenance is not a sign that a friendship is struggling. It is the sign that someone understands how friendships actually work. And finally, there is the concept of ambiguous loss. It describes the particular grief that comes from losses that have no clear boundary, no funeral, no formal ending, no moment of acknowledged closure. The friendship that faded is a perfect example. The person is still there, you could call them. The relationship technically still exists. But the version of it that mattered, the closeness, the knowing, the ease of it that is gone. And because it never officially ended, there is no recognized space to grieve it. So most people don't. They just carry it quietly, without quite knowing what it is they're carrying. Here is the thing that sits underneath all of this. We live in an era that has made staying in touch easier than it has ever been in human history. A message takes 3 seconds. A voice note takes 30. A call takes nothing but the willingness to make it. And yet, by almost every measure, people report having fewer close friends than any previous generation. The tools got better, the friendships got thinner. Because what technology gave us in convenience, it quietly took from us in intentionality. When everything is easy, nothing feels urgent. When you can reach someone at any moment, there is never a moment that feels like the right one. And so the message doesn't get sent, the call doesn't get made, and the silence grows one unconsidered day at a time. The friendships that survive the long arc of a life are not the ones built on the most history or the most affection. They are the ones where at least one person refused to let the silence become permanent, where someone looked at the distance that had grown and decided, quietly and without drama, to close it. That is not a grand gesture. It's a text. It's a call. It's remembering a birthday, not because your phone reminded you, but because that person still lives in you somewhere, and you let that matter. The question this video is really asking is a simple one. Who are you letting go of right now, one quiet day at a time? And is that actually what you want? We all have a friend that we haven't spoken to in longer than we're comfortable admitting. Someone who knew them before they became whoever they are now. Someone who laughed with them in a room they can still picture, at a joke they can no longer remember, on a night that felt ordinary then and feels irreplaceable now. That person is still there. The friendship is not over. It is just waiting. Relationships do not require perfection or grand gestures or the right words perfectly assembled. They require presence. A small, consistent, deliberate choice to show up imperfectly, incompletely, even awkwardly after too long away. A message that says nothing more than, I was thinking about you. I don't want us to be strangers. Because here is what time eventually teaches everyone who lives long enough to learn it. The things you will grieve most are not the arguments, not the endings that came with noise and clarity. They are the silences you let go on too long, the calls you kept meaning to make, the friendships that faded not because they stopped being worth saving, but because saving them never felt quite urgent enough, until it was too late to try. You still have time. Not unlimited time, not guaranteed time, but right now, in this moment, after watching this, you have time. Use it. Send the message. Make the call. Show up for the people who still exist in your life, before they only exist in your memory.